Happy Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day, everyone!
Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day? Is that really a thing? What the fuck?
So I'd like to reflect upon the results of last year when I posted a video entitled 5 Reasons Why Homosexuality is Bad.
If you haven't watched it already, this is actually part 2 to a collaboration I'm doing with Finite Atticus. To watch part 1, click here.
In the video, I introduced myself as a friend of homosexuals, not a hater, and then I went on to list the practical reasons why homosexuality is destructive to humans.
You're right, you started your video off by introducing yourself as a friend to homosexuals. And then you promptly proved why you are not a friend of homosexuals. In fact, you made an impressive case for why you're not a friend.
Mind you, I try to be tolerant. I have an open comment section. If you disagree with me, I respect your right to say so, and I will not censor you. But I do not tolerate abuse.
I'm actually getting pretty bored of your still image that I don't quite understand. So I'm just gonna put up some pictures of some animals. Everybody loves animals.
If anyone deliberately misrepresents my argument so they can hassle me, if anyone accuses me of lying about my non-malice of homosexuals, if anyone unjustly calls me a homophobe, which means I have an irrational fear of homosexuals, I block that person.
No, that's not entirely accurate. The modern definition of homophobia actually encompasses a wide range of different feelings towards LGBTs, including antipathy, contempt, prejudice, aversion, hatred, and yes, fear. So you blocked people for using the modern definition of homophobia instead of your definition of homophobia.
Same goes for the people who put up entire walls of comments as if to shout me down. If you want to tell me that I'm wrong, at least be reasonable about it.
Yeah, come on folks, don't use so many words. Be reasonable. Really though, you find it unreasonable to post multiple comments out of rage and disgust? When your video was uploaded, YouTube had a very stringent character limit. If you couldn't get out your idea within a certain number of characters, you had to start another dialogue box. That's not their fault, that's YouTube's fault.
On to the constructive feedback. I noticed a lot of repetitive material, so I'd like to list the popular answers here to give everyone an idea of how homosexual activists argue.
You know, I have to say I'm pretty impressed with how well thought out and reasonable you've been so far with your arguments. I can't wait to see what you have to say.
My first point was that homosexuality was exceptionally disease-ridden.
What in the fuck kind of piece of shit puts it that way? Even if it was remotely true that the homosexual community receives even more young fatalities due to disease, why would you put it that way? Why would you say it is disease-ridden? See, this is the kind of shit that you said that made people think that you're a homophobe, and you're only proving them right by repeating it.
And that it isn't loving to endorse a condition that so brutally reduces one's life expectancy.
You know, I would almost believe you here if you didn't have to cherry pick your data to make this point. It just makes me feel like you're using this as an excuse to condemn homosexuality and hiding it behind the word love.
One opponent responded that my data was skewed since I was using Paul Cameron's research and his methods sucked. While it's true that one of my sources had Cameron as a co-author, it was a different paper than what she'd cited.
That's a good point. Just because a researcher made some mistakes in one of his papers doesn't mean that another one of his papers isn't good.
Furthermore, Cameron may have a flair for exaggeration in his statements, but his actual findings were still foreboding.
Wow, whatever this research is, it sounds really impressive. I mean, if it's foreboding, I can't wait to hear what he actually did to make his findings.
He looked into a bunch of gay obituaries to get an average on what age they die, and found them alarmingly young.
You have got to be fucking kidding me. Obituaries? His research material was obituaries?
The Center for Disease Control would later report that gay people are more severely affected by HIV than any other group in the US.
The homophobic community has been using HIV and AIDS as an excuse to hate on gays since the 80s. Okay, folks, get over it. They actually used to believe that the only people that could even get AIDS were homosexuals. Though I will concede that it is a lot easier for males to pass on HIV to other males, that does not mean they're the only people on Earth that have HIV. Several heterosexual couples have HIV. Several heterosexual people have HIV. It is not the gay disease. Using your reasoning, I can say you are statistically more likely to get raped by a priest if you were an altar boy. So I cannot say that it is a loving position to condone people becoming altar boys.
When neutral sources like the CDC are saying similar things to the biased, bigoted, homo-intolerant ones, that should give you pause.
No, it doesn't give me pause. It's pretty typical for intolerant people to use research that defends the position they've already created.
Another opponent brushed the data aside and argued that if homosexuals took proper precautions, everything would be fine. If they were allowed to marry and stayed faithful to one partner and got themselves tested and used lubricants and condoms, there would be no argument about disease. To an extent, this guy's right.
To an extent, he's 100% correct. See, he recognized that what you did was take the worst case scenario data that you could possibly find and used it to misrepresent the homosexual community. It's easy to brush it aside because it is improperly done research. If every homosexual man was in a loving, monogamous relationship, used proper precautions, of course, there would be no disease within the homosexual community. But we know that not to be the case because homosexuals are people just like us, and people make mistakes. People make bad decisions. Let's say, hypothetically, that homosexuals stopped having sex with each other altogether, and they abolished all sexually transmitted diseases within their community. Does that mean AIDS disappears? Does that mean herpes disappears? No, of course not, because the heterosexual community also transmits diseases among themselves.
Take everything that heterosexuals do, apply said precautions to homosexuals, and the STD count goes down. This argument has two weaknesses.
Yeah, it has two weaknesses. Those weaknesses are 1, it assumes that all heterosexuals take precautions, and 2, it assumes that no homosexuals take precautions. Of course, that must be the two weaknesses you're talking about, right?
It's a poor hypothetical about the future, and it implies a perfect world.
No, as far as hypotheticals goes, it's perfectly fine. And how is assuming a perfect world a weakness? That's kind of what makes it a hypothetical.
I say, if you want to know the future, observe the past. If the implementation of civil unions didn't change anything, and it didn't, what will marriage do aside from bestowing additional legal rights? And we don't live in a perfect world. People constantly disregard protection. Yet according to the data and common knowledge, homosexuals are hit the hardest.
Oh, well then we shouldn't even try, right? I mean, equal rights are so trivial anyways. Who even gives a shit about those these days? Look, the homosexual community today is still looked upon as being somewhat oppressed by people like you, in fact. And when a person is oppressed, when their beliefs and their feelings or their convictions are considered to be wrong, the things that they do, they have to do in private. Bringing homosexuality to the forefront, giving these people the rights that they deserve, giving them the ability to build the life that everyone deserves to build for themselves. It won't just give them better rights. It'll give them confidence. It'll give them the ability to be themselves, to be smart about the decisions they make. When a person has to live in the shadows, they only think about the here and now, but when somebody can live out in the open, they have a chance to think about the future. They have a chance to think about the decisions they make and the effect that they will have on their future. When you give somebody the chance to live a normal, well-rounded, thought-out life, you give them a life. So what am I saying? Even if, hypothetically, it won't change the disease rate, that is irrelevant.
Still another opponent said that homosexuals have a higher death rate because everybody else bullies them into suicide, and if we just accept them, it wouldn't be so bad.
Actually, that's correct. Statistically, the average suicide rate is considerably higher in the LGBT community when compared to similar heterosexual groups.
This is a guilt by association fallacy. Bullies who victimize people for being different are not in the same category as friends and family who have legitimate concerns about the problems that come with homosexuality.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. Although you may consider yourself to be a concerned party, your actions speak louder than words, and your actions are the actions of a bully. You're openly admitting that you do not accept somebody for who they are and tell them that they need to change. Do you know what that does to somebody? Do you understand psychologically the effects that has on a person? You destroy a person from the inside out because you create an internal conflict for which there is no resolution. You are faced with two options: accept who you are and say fuck you to all of the bullies, or you have to lie about who you are, and having to lie about yourself could destroy you.
Overgeneralizing like this is militant to a fault, because it rouses a me against the world outlook on life, and anyone who does not embrace homosexuality is turned into an enemy. Friends and family may not always handle their situation gracefully, but if they've taken the time to know or raise someone, they mean well. Roping them together with actual bullies is one of the most hideously immoral decisions anyone can make.
No, because a bully is still a bully, just like a murderer is still a murderer. All you're doing is showing the difference between somebody who committed murder 1 and somebody who committed manslaughter. Yes, the intentions may have been different, but the end result is the same.
My second point in the video was that homosexuality's addictiveness was lethal.
See, my problem with that argument is that you had no idea what the fuck you were talking about. A homosexual that acts homosexual is just a person being themselves. You can't call that an addiction. It's like saying a man that loves his wife is an addict. Using the word addiction to describe love is erroneous, unless of course you're using hyperbole.
Anyone who disregarded the first point missed the significance of this second one. I got answers like, love is addicting, smiling is addictive, all of which sidestepped the fact that addictions have adverse consequences.
No, these people were just pointing out that you're misusing the word addiction, or that you don't understand that homosexuality is not an addiction. They're equating the addiction of homosexuality with smiles and giggling and love. Unless, of course, you are trying to say that the addiction of smiling has adverse effects on your life. Does it? Do you just not smile?
As I said, people will make enemies of their friends and family before they admit their homosexuality is bad.
Yes, and all the power to them. Fuck those people that say that homosexuality is bad. Fuck people like you.
By the way, I've been criticized for treating homosexuality as though it's a choice, when in fact I don't consider it a conscious one. Rather, I hold that it is a mental disorder, and the choice is only in fighting it or giving into it.
Wait. Let me get this straight. You believe that being gay is a mental illness, even though the very science you so happily enjoy on a daily basis says that it's not. You advocate that gay people undergo pseudoscientific treatment that has never been proven to work. Treatment that, by the way, if it was performed on straight people would be tantamount to torture and decried by everyone. You lack the intellectual honesty to look at any opposing point of view, no matter how good the argument is. You use paint-by-numbers apologetics to exclude any non-religious person from disagreeing with you, and then blithely say that their arguments are straw men when they are clearly not. And with all the flair and bluster of an 8-year-old dominating the monkey bars, you stamp your feet and assert that something is true simply because you and your God say it is. You know what I think? I think that no matter what we say, you won't listen. That is close-minded. Fine. Stay that way. You don't want to be called a bigot or a homophobe? Fine. I won't call you those things. I will say this, however. You, sir, are certainly no friend of gays.
And yes, I realize that the APA currently doesn't call it a disorder, even though it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck. If you want to know how I'm so certain, please read The Trojan Couch, a research article by Jeffrey Satinover, PhD.
Oh my god, you are the world's biggest piece of shit. Do you understand what you're even saying? You're saying that people who are gay are sick in the head. What the hell is wrong with you? Okay, so I've read The Trojan Couch, and I would love to give you guys a link to this paper, but the PDF for it has been taken off the Narth Institute website, or either that or they've hidden it. it, or they've made it a pay-only thing. I don't know. I'll just put a link to the Narth Institute underneath, and maybe you guys can find it. So what Jeffrey Satinover, PhD, basically does in the paper, he talks about the history of psychiatry going back to 1973. That was when homosexuality was taken off of the list of considered mental illnesses. What he does after that is make a bunch of assertions saying that that was a political move for political reasons, and that the psychiatric community was basically ignoring known science, when the exact opposite was the fact. The reason homosexuality was put on the mental illness list was because of political reasons. The reason it was taken off, there was a recognition that that was political and that nobody actually knew why people were gay. And to this day, we still don't even really know. In fact, I would argue that the people at the Narth Institute are trying to put it back on the list for political reasons, completely negating the thesis of the paper. In fact, somebody should have told you to look into the patient regression rate for the Narth Institute, because Narth Institute's patients regress at a rate of like 95%, showing that what they're doing is actually nothing but brainwashing people and tricking them into thinking they're not gay, and then eventually they figure out, oh wait, yes, I still am gay. I just don't act like it anymore.
My third argument was that homosexuality attacked the institution of marriage by attempting to redefine it.
No, it's not trying to attack it, it's trying to join it. There's a difference. That's the exact same kind of argument they made when they introduced black players to the white baseball league. They said that they're attacking the institution of the Major League Baseball Association by trying to redefine the rules. It's asinine.
I held that the principle of marriage was procreation, and anything else would shift the emphasis from family to sexual decadence.
No, the principle of marriage is not procreation, it's security. I mean, sure, from an evolutionary standpoint, you could say the mechanism of sex is for procreation, but the practice of sex is not usually for procreation, so it's a really weak argument. But of course, I know you're not coming at this from an evolutionary standpoint, you're coming at it from a biblical standpoint. And even then, the principle of marriage was not to procreate, the principle of marriage was to make binds between families. Procreation was just the result.
The counter-arguments almost exclusively consisted of this. Homosexual couples have been proven to be just as capable parents as heterosexual ones. I could get into why that's incorrect, but I'll just make do with the fact that it sidesteps my point.
Okay, so you're basically strawmanning the argument by only showing us examples of people who sidestepped your argument instead of people that actually gave you good arguments. What were the good arguments? What were the ones that made you pause? I want to hear your rebuttal to those. Again, people are basically just pointing out that you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to families and marriage. They're not actually saying that the mechanism of procreation can still exist within a homosexual couple. We know that's not true.
Procreation has nothing if not marriage.
Your point is procreation has nothing if not marriage. That is not even a sentence.
Saying that homosexuals would make good foster parents is not sufficient to change the foundational core of marriage. Nor, for that matter, is the argument that there are millions of gay couples who just really want to be married.
And again, I'd like to point out that your ideal of the foundation of marriage is arbitrary and made up, and does not serve society in any way. Nor have you proven that your ideal of marriage even really exists outside of your head and the head of other creationists, other than to point out the fact that God said so.
Millions of polygamists really want their marriages recognized, and so do millions of close relatives. The difference is, they haven't gotten the publicity yet. The homosexual torch is still the one burning brightest right now.
Can you just move on to the next subject, please? Because so far you've not even made a single argument.
In my fourth argument, I reasoned that men and women need each other to survive, and homosexuality necessarily made the statement that they didn't.
Well, you made the argument that men and women need each other to survive as a society. Yes, I would agree with that, 100%. But let's say, arguably, you're right, that it does make that statement. They're right, because not all of us are gay. It's like 1 in 6 or 1 in 10 people are gay right now, somewhere in that range. So even if 1 out of every 2 people on Earth were gay, that would still leave half the population to mate, multiply, and progress the genetic code into further generations. Your point is moot. But you know what? There's a study that says 1 out of every 10 people are gay, and that kind of weirds me out because I've had sex with 10 people, so statistically at least one of those dudes was gay.
Furthermore, it was sexist, because while heterosexuals appreciate the features of their own sex and the opposites, homosexuals are only into their own sex. In short, it is demeaning to suggest that an entire sex is unwanted and replaceable.
What? You are saying that gay people are sexist because they only want to have sex with their own gender. And you're saying that heterosexual men appreciate the features of both men and women? Are you sure about that? Because in what way do they appreciate them both? Are you speaking from experience? Because you might not be as heterosexual as you're leading on. Heterosexual men might appreciate the way other men look because they might want to aspire to look like that themselves, or they might just like the human form and find it beautiful, but men don't appreciate the female form in that quite exact same way. They see it in more the I want to bang that kind of way.
In response, one opponent drew a parallel, saying that 2 black people marrying is a symbolic rejection of all interracial marriage. He told me that this was basically my statement, as if I were saying that homosexuals simply get together to spite all non-homosexuals.
Yeah, and that's a really killer argument because he's using your reasoning to prove that even all heterosexual couples get together just to spite homosexual couples. He's pointing out that your reasoning is flawed.
Obviously, it's not like that.
And now it's time for the world's worst Christian backpedal.
I'm glad that most homosexuals aren't actively sexist, like the feminazi lesbians of the 70s. It's the one feature of homosexuality that they do somewhat fight, being politically incorrect and all.
Congratulations on not even addressing the argument at all. That didn't make any sense.
Another opponent said that heterosexuals were just as sexist for refusing to have intercourse with people of their own sex.
Oh yeah, I just made that argument, and so did Atticus. I would like to hear what you have to say about that.
That's a pretty stupid argument.
You're a stupid argument. I don't have to stand around and listen to this. Atticus is gay as a meanie pants.
You don't need to bang someone to appreciate the intrinsic differences unique to each sex.
I am putting that quote on a plaque in my living room.
You're only sexist when you think that one sex is decidedly better than the other. If you honestly believe that you can replace the whole role of the other sex, that qualifies.
According to you.
A third opponent generalized and said that everyone's sexist, get over it. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. What's certain is that in homosexuality, it comes with the package.
Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. So if you don't know for sure that it's not true, you are literally admitting that you are sexist right now. Because if you were not sexist, you'd be able to say, well, that's clearly not true because I'm not sexist. Fail. Sure, I'm learning a lot about you today.
A lot of people apparently got confused by my 5th argument.
No, nobody was confused by your 5th argument. We just thought it was dumb.
I said that the male and female bodies were powerful evidence of an intelligent creator because of our purposeful design. Therefore, if we defied the creator's intended design with something like homosexuality, we denied absolute authority. Without absolute authority, all morality is relative and absolutely nothing has meaning.
See, there's a wicked bad flaw in this argument because it requires a whole bunch of ifs. If there's a creator. Well, demonstrate that there's a fucking creator and then we'll agree with your argument. Otherwise, it's just a hypothetical that has no bounds within reality.
Not surprisingly, most of my opponents were atheists, so they didn't grasp the significance of this.
Well, the Flying Spaghetti Monster says that everybody has to be gay, otherwise he'll burn all our houses down. But for some reason, everybody that I tell this story to does not believe in this Flying Spaghetti Monster, so they're not understanding the significance of what I'm saying to them.
I'll try to make it relevant. If there is no ultimate authority, nobody can condemn me as an insensitive, intolerant, prejudiced, homophobic bigot for opposing homosexuality. These qualities are not wrong because there is no right or wrong. We're not created, so we have no true function, just the ones we invent.
Actually, removing God from the equation doesn't create a problem. There is still a right or wrong, and it's what society says is right and wrong. Sure, you're allowed to have your opinion, and you don't have to like something that you don't like, but you do have to tolerate it. That's what being part of a society is like. You know, this kind of reminds me of an argument that I heard way back in the day.
What you believe is how you behave, right?
Yes.
We all agree with that?
Yeah.
So if you're taught that you're nothing but an animal and that you're nothing but something that has no morals, there are no moral absolutes, you're going to behave that way. Sex outside of marriage, who cares? Lying, stealing, who cares? Mm-hmm. It wouldn't matter. I was on the Fundamentally Flawed podcast with a couple atheists, and they asked me, they said, Eric, if you were not a Christian, would that let you just do anything you want to do? I said, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I would live my life with absolutely no restraints at all. I would do whatever I want. And that's where you guys get lots of testimonies.
I'd be in jail if I wasn't a Christian.
Yeah, so just like your good friend Eric Hovind here, you're basically admitting that you're a psychopath.
Those feelings I'm hurting? Chemical reactions in a brain that will be dead in less than 100 years, nothing more. The logic factor? A human construct that dies with our finite race. So why should you care what I have to say? Why should I care what you have to say? The things that matter to us are an illusion, worthless in perspective of this enormous universe.
Yeah, it's not like we have to live with each other now. Listen, 100 years from now, yes, we'll both be dust in the earth, but that doesn't mean that today we don't have to get along. That doesn't mean today we don't have to figure out how to coexist. Tolerance. Because do you know what really doesn't serve a purpose for the progression of the human race? Arguing over subjects that don't affect us personally.
Anyway, I suspect my opponents don't often think about the depressing implications of a pointless existence, as they completely ignore their own rules in their responses.
Yeah, you're right. If we all realized how depressing reality was, we'd just make one up in our brain just like you. And that would solve all our problems. No, it wouldn't.
One lady said that I was using religion and started quoting Leviticus at me. That was plenty irrelevant to my point in reality, let alone in a godless universe where her words would have been a waste of effort no matter what.
Are you admitting that Leviticus is not really important in reality? Or are you admitting that you're too intellectually dishonest to realize that you're cherry-picking from the Bible?
Someone else said, for my point to count, I'd need to prove that there really was a creator.
I said that too.
That's simple enough. If you even suspect that there might be a creator, the fact that heterosexuality brings about life and homosexuality results in death is proof enough of whose side he's on. If you're certain there isn't a creator, you won't find any purpose for your life arguing about it with me. You're a sham and I'm a sham, so don't even pretend like this matters.
Well, one of us is a sham. You're kind of like that kid that if he couldn't play with the other kids in the swimming pool, he'd just pee in it so that nobody could play in it. You're basically saying that because we won't agree with your level of thinking, you won't even consider our level of thinking. What a piece of shit.
The relevant stuff. I had a couple other comments that should be mentioned for their frequency. Animals. Some are homosexual, so it must be natural.
Yeah, animal behavior is basically our definition of natural.
People, please, don't look to the animal kingdom to help your case. Animals rape, kidnap, and cannibalize, too.
Appeal to emotion, appeal to emotion, appeal to emotion. Just because they do bad things doesn't mean that it's not natural.
And let's not forget that we see genetic mutations in nature.
Yeah, you're right, and humans never have genetic... Oh.
Do a cow's horns serve their intended function when they curve backwards and push back into the animal's skull?
Do a human's molars serve their intended purpose when they impact and cause gangrene and death?
No. Paradoxical though this may sound, not everything in nature is natural.
Yes, nature is by definition natural.
And as for this unnatural computer you guys keep reminding me that I'm using, it is a product of humanity's creativity. It's a beehive. We were created to create. We were not created to commit self-destructive acts.
So, a computer is natural because humans make it, but two male penguins shacking up is not natural. Ugh.
To those of you who still insist that you can't see the problem with men having sex with men and women having sex with other women...
Actually, my browser history would tell you that I do have a problem with women having sex with other women. A different kind of problem, though.
Who say that if I just give you the resources to back up my claims, you'll suddenly believe me. It won't happen. If you can still argue after hearing what the Center for Disease Control had to say, you aren't open to reason.
Except those aren't the figures that we're having problems with. It's the assertions you're making based on those figures that you're not backing up.
The links in the description below are not for you, but for the people who are still choosing sides in this matter.
Yes, you have two choices, tolerance and acceptance, or bigotry. Choose wisely.